Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, March the 6th, 2025. Today there is a first quarter moon. So, we had the new moon on February the 28th, and now the lunar cycle has moved on, and we have this square between the sun and the moon, which is a first quarter moon, and that's what I want to look at in this video. But before I look at the first quarter moon in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, March the 6th. As always, if you like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indeed like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very happy to have you as a subscriber. So here is a picture of the planets for today, set for New York. So there is the moon still in Gemini, and it is making a square to the sun in Pisces. So with the moon continuing to be in Gemini, we have an air sign, but the moon occupies. So when you've got the moon in Gemini in an air sign, it can be quite talkative. The emphasis is on what we say, what we think. There's usually a certain flexibility to the air signs, and with the moon in Gemini, what do you do when you don't understand something, when you feel lost, where you feel pressurized? Well, sometimes the best thing to do is just talk, and through your words you can get out of difficult situations. Now the moon, yes, it's making a first quarter moon. It's making a first quarter. That means there's a sextile a square between the sun and the moon, and this is happening in the waxing phase of the moon. So the moon has been getting bigger, ever since that new moon on February the 28th, and at the first quarter, there is a certain sense of crisis. That this is a relatively new situation. We might feel that now is the time where we have to take some kind of action. And yes, I'll be looking at this first quarter moon in detail later in the video. Though looking at it from a different way, moon in Gemini square the sun in Pisces, you might say that there's a certain tension there. The sun is in Pisces. Pisces is a flexible sign, it's a mutable sign, but it is a water sign. And part of us would like to just drift along and use our feelings to work our way through, but the moon in Gemini has a different approach, suggests a different approach, and there may be a challenge between how we think about something and how we feel about it, and they may not always match. And the moon, when it's moving through Gemini, it makes a sextile to Venus, and it makes a conjunction to Jupiter. Now that sextile to Venus in particular, maybe more about the beginning of the day, and might be stronger in Australia or New Zealand, but still there is a sextile relationship between the moon and Venus, and also this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter, which I would regard as being pretty fortunate. It does allow us to express ourselves. I mean, moon in Gemini is about expression. Venus is a planet of relationships. The moon is making a sextile to Venus, and also the moon is conjunct Jupiter. Now, how close the moon is to that conjunction kind of depends where you are, but it's certainly in the same sign, and the moon-Jupiter conjunction is one of the most fortunate aspects there is. You might ask why. Well, simply because Jupiter is the planet of good fortune. Traditionally, it's the greater benefic, even though it is in Gemini, the sign of its detriment, and the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. So the moon is in a way elevated by that conjunction to Jupiter, and that does create a certain amount of luck. And you could say that the moon is the most important the most important planet in the chart, certainly from a Vedic perspective. We're used in the West to maybe thinking about the sun, but the moon is action in the chart. It's things moving from one thing to another. All the other planets move too slowly, so the moon moving to a conjunction to the sun is certainly something is fortunate and that should help us make the most of today. And so that's a picture for London. Sorry, no, it's not. It's a picture for New York with the moon at 16 Gemini. And if you're in Sydney, Australia, the moon is just earlier in the sign. Its moon is around 7 Gemini. So the big difference between Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, and America and the Americas is that in Australasia, the moon is applying to a sextile of Venus and a conjunction to Jupiter. In the Americas, by and large, it's separating. And that makes me think that in Australasia, all things being equal, things are going to be a little bit luckier, even better. I think that in Australasia, you really will be able to make the most of that moon conjunct Jupiter because it's getting stronger as the day progresses. Likewise with the sextile to Venus, and that makes it easier to sort of use the lunar energy in terms of making your various projects successful. You can still do that in the Americas, but it might not be quite so obvious, and it might just need a little more work. Then there is the heliocentric picture, and here it is. So heliocentrically, if you look at the Earth, the Earth is at 16 Virgo. It is applying to a sesquiquadrate with Pluto, so that they are sort of Earth and Pluto 4.5 signs apart. That's 135 degrees, 3/8 of a circle. And with that Earth-Pluto sesquiquadrate, we may be somewhat uncertain of ourselves because the Earth is us. It's down here on our planet, and it makes this sesquiquadrate to Pluto. And so there may be not just uncertainty, but a certain amount of fear and hesitancy. Where are we going? What are we actually moving into? And there might be concerns in that department, especially as Mercury is also making a quincunx to Pluto. We're aware that maybe we've taken on too much. That may not be us taking on too much. It may be our rulers taking on too much, governments taking on too much. I do think that the heliocentric chart is, in some ways, more about governments and organizations than ordinary people. So we don't necessarily have to take that Earth sesquiquadrate Pluto personally, but it's still telling us about the environment in which we live. And, it's a reminder that it is an uncertain world where people are always, trying to be in control, and it's difficult to know what's happening under the surface. So, that's the heliocentric picture. Oh, also, if you're interested, there is an aspect between Venus and the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So there's Mars, there's Jupiter. Midpoint is around 21 Cancer, so that means that Venus is making a semi-square to the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, and that might be quite fortunate. It's quite energetic, and Venus can be about art and aesthetics, and with Venus on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, it might be about really trying to push one's artistic ability out there into the open. Maybe too much so. May not be us trying to push our tastes onto other people. It may be other people trying to push their tastes onto us. Because with Mars Jupiter, there's often a sense of overkill, just putting too much energy into something. And if something can't be recognized straight away, then maybe one should just leave it. But it might be just very much in our face with Venus aspecting the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Venus is, of course, a planet of relationships, and it just may be that certain relationships, it may feel that someone is trying too hard. That is a possibility. With Mars-Jupiter, it sounds fortunate, that Mars-Jupiter pairing, but it can be just too much of a good thing. So, that Venus on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be negative, but we perhaps have to be wary of excess. Venus is the planet of indulgence, and so we don't want to take things too far. And we might witness other people going too far, spending too much money, eating too much, and we might disapprove. So, that's the heliocentric picture. And now I want to move on to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, March the 6th, 2025. Aries. Today is not so different from yesterday. The moon is still in Gemini. The moon is making a fortunate aspect to Venus, making a sextile to Venus. Moon is also making a conjunction to Jupiter. And that means that it's a day when you can be yourself. You can just be an Aries. You can push forward with whatever you want to do. I don't think there'll be too much resistance. People will like your approach, and you're not going to be too intense. You're going to have a light touch, which I think in many cases will be appreciated. Things have been a bit heavy recently. They might even have been a bit heavy in your own life, and just to be able to be spontaneous and say what you think, do what you want to do, and also be able to act on the spur of a moment. That could be quite important. So don't feel, Aries, that today you absolutely need to have a fixed plan, that you need to tell everyone what you're going to do well in advance. No, you need a certain sense of spontaneity, and if you decide you want to go somewhere, then that might be a good thing to do. In many cases, the less planning, the better. Because, if there's no planning, there's more scope for just things to happen out of the blue, and things can happen which not just surprising, but which can be fortunate. And, with the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, be open about what you think and what you feel, and let people know. And through conversation and through short distance traveling, you can create your own luck. And additionally, moon sextile Venus may say something about relationships. Venus is in Aries, and Venus is a planet that has a special connection with relationships in the Aries chart. And so with Venus in Aries in your sign, that does indicate that some people really like you. Your popularity rating is higher than usual. And so with the moon making a sextile to Venus, that does give your popularity a real boost. And that should help you sort of make new friends, intensify existing relationships. And if there's been any recent misunderstanding, with moon sextile Venus, you can actually start to address it, and you can open lines of communication. Really, that shouldn't that shouldn't be a problem. Now, one aspect we do have today, which, if you like, is the headline aspect, is Sun square Moon. It is a first quarter moon, and it's not necessarily an enormous deal for you. I don't think it hits you directly, but still, Sun square Moon could be a call for action. And the Sun is in Pisces, and aside from what's going on today, and in a very sort of short-term basis, with the Sun in Pisces, many Arians, in a longer-term sense, not just about today, do want to hold something back. You don't want to tell people everything. I've just said that it's a day when you can be very communicative. The question is, what are you communicating? And that Sun square Moon may be a challenge, if you like, even a mini crisis. And a crisis, I mean that in the fortunate sense of the word, in the traditional sense of it. We have a decision to make. And with the Sun square Moon, the question is, how much do you reveal? How much do you say? If you say too little, then things might change. Then things might not change. And you may not be able to make the most of this time in the lunar cycle. This is a time when things should be actually moving, when we should start to see manifestation. And if you focus too much on trivial details, things that aren't important, you might talk a lot, but what is the substance of what you're saying? And there are some things that do have to be said, and if you don't say them now, at this moment of crisis, then it's quite possible that you've missed your moment, and you might not be able to make the most of this lunar cycle. And so ask yourself, Aries, what is that challenge? What needs to be communicated? And you might be afraid about the consequences, but it is a time for communication, and through the right words, you can really move things along. Taurus, the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and Venus is your ruler. So with the moon making a sextile to Venus, it's a time when you are able to really give quite a good account of yourself, even if you don't necessarily feel like it. Some Taurians might be of a view that it's a time to not give people everything, to fall back on your own resources. After all, Venus is retrograde, and perhaps, Taurus, you're still getting used to Venus being retrograde, not being quite as clear as you'd like to be, and having to hold back, or thinking that you have to hold back. But with moon sextile Venus, there is always a way of saying things. There's always a way of having an impression on the world, and that's definitely something you can do. And you shouldn't forget that Venus is still in mutual reception with the Sun, and so it's easy to say, well, Venus is a ruler of Taurus. But when Venus is in mutual reception by exaltation of the Sun, you could say that temporally the Sun is rather like your co-ruler. By its mutual reception by exaltation, not by sign. And so you look at the Sun, and the Sun is in Pisces, and it's in a sign that is connected with other people and with socializing, at least in the Taurian chart. And so don't be too reticent. And if you want to be with other people, if you want to just be yourself and not worry what other people think, that's fine, because people are not going to be especially judgmental today. You can just literally be yourself, and you don't have to be especially self-conscious. Now, the moon in Gemini may indicate a financial dimension, and the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and it is making a conjunction to Jupiter. So the moon is making two fortunate aspects, and that conjunction to Jupiter is especially fortunate. And this might give you a chance to do something financially over the course of the day. And it may be a piece of luck. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be a huge piece of luck. It's not the kind of luck that just comes out of the blue, the kind of luck that you might have to work on. But there might be an opportunity to do something financially, which really is up to you. If you just do nothing and you let the opportunity pass, well, that's up to you. So work on it, think about it. If there is something of a financial nature that is bothering you, then do think about it, work on it, and see what you can come up with. And you might find that you can turn things around. That Moon-Jupiter conjunction has got to work somehow, and money is one way it can manifest. It can also be about getting hold of something. There might be something you want, physical object, you want it, and you have a chance to get it, and you may be able to get it with not quite as much effort as you had thought you would have to expend. So, if there's something you want, maybe you should go out of your way to get it. It may cost you less than expected. It may cost you nothing. And so that's one side of what's going on today. Also, like yesterday, I do think that you'll be able to express yourself powerfully. The words will flow freely. You may not think they're going to flow freely, with Venus in retrograde in your 12th house, kind of, because Aries is the sign before Taurus. You might not think it's going to happen, but it actually is going to happen. And as soon as you start to talk, and as soon as you start to argue your case, then you'll notice that things are happening, that you actually are able to give your words real power, and people are going to listen. And we shouldn't forget that heliocentrically, Venus is semi-square the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And that Mars-Venus semi-square the Mars-Jupiter midpoint is a little bit of a mixed blessing. You could take things too far. You might feel uncomfortable with how far you can take things. But if you show a bit of discipline, you can really focus your energy, decide you want something, decide you're going to be enthusiastic about it, and this enthusiasm will be clear, and people are going to like it. It's not going to be quite as disruptive as you think it is, provided you do show some self-discipline. But I do think that is something you can do. So overall, Taurus, do believe in yourself today. And if there's anything you want, especially of a material nature, there's actually a pretty good chance you can actually get hold of it. Gemini, we have continued action in your sign. Moon still in Gemini. Moon is now making a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini. And so this conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter it's something that you really need to take advantage of. And you need to count your blessings. It's easy to be cynical, to think that everything is a bit of a waste of time. Opportunities come and go, but are they real opportunities? But don't ask too many questions. And with Moon conjunct Jupiter in your sign, it can be genuinely fortunate. If you actually are prepared to accept this good fortune, it is an opportunity, but it's not an opportunity you necessarily have to take. And with Moon conjunct Jupiter, it's important to be positive, and it is a reminder that Jupiter is in your sign. I mean, we know Jupiter's in your sign. Jupiter's going to be in your sign until June. Now, the question then is, how many more Moon-Jupiter conjunctions in Gemini are there? I know you think, oh, well, Moon-Jupiter conjunctions happen every month, so if you miss this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, well, you can always go for the next Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Okay, the next Moon-Jupiter conjunction will be in Gemini, will be in April. And after that, it'll probably be in May, and after that, June maybe. You've got 3 more Moon-Jupiter conjunctions. And after that, Jupiter goes into Gemini. I think it's 3 more, something like that. And these are fortunate days for you. But again, it's not going to last forever. Once Jupiter goes into Cancer, which does happen in June, there won't be any more Moon-Jupiter conjunctions in Gemini. Not for over a decade. So do take advantage of today, of that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, especially as the Moon, as it starts to make a conjunction to Jupiter, it makes a sextile to Venus. So Venus and Jupiter are the benefics. Jupiter is a greater benefic. Venus is a lesser benefic. The Moon is aspecting both of them, and this does make it a fortunate and a happy day. At least it can be. And so make sure you are available and take advantage of all the opportunities that are there for you, and don't be dismissive of other people. Other people like you, actually. You may not think they do, but they do. And they're prepared to help you, offer a helping hand, provide friendship and support. It's all there if you want it to be there. So that's definitely something that can happen. Maybe it will happen if you just have a positive approach, because that positivity today really does matter. And as far as relationships are concerned, this Moon-Jupiter conjunction sextile Venus should be pretty fortunate. It does allow you to get on with people, and to get on with people who are close to you. You have something to say, you have something to communicate, you have something to offer. It's not a super emotional event, this Moon conjunct Jupiter, Moon sextile Venus. It's just pleasant. And the fact that there isn't so much emotion around, that you don't have to relate to people emotionally if you don't want to, it just makes it just so much easier. And it may be about this sort of combination of fire and air. Fire and air, those two elements, they work very well. Maybe someone else has got the action, the ideas. Not the ideas, but the impetus. You're the one with the ideas, and you put it all together, and there can just be a sense that you and another person are working well, and you've both got things to offer each other, which are just a natural complement. Cancer, when one is looking at these daily horoscopes, there's often a tension between aspect and placement. That's often the issue. So in terms of placement, we could say, well, the Moon is in Gemini, and so the Moon being in Gemini might not be too comfortable for Cancerians, all things being equal, because Cancer and Gemini are very different signs. Yet the moon is your ruler, and we also have to consider what it is connected to. It's not just the fact that the moon is in Gemini, it is also the fact that the moon is conjunct Jupiter and it is sextile Venus. And in terms of the way I do astrology, I probably put more emphasis on aspects than most other astrologers, and I do think the aspect in many cases trumps placement. And so it is a day when you maybe should be considering the aspects, and the aspects we've got. Moon is sextile Venus, moon is conjunct Jupiter. Those two aspects are entirely fortunate, and because Venus and Jupiter are the two most fortunate planets in the solar system, and so if you've got a day when the moon is aspecting both of them, that really does give you good luck. You can be fortunate. Things can work your way, and you don't necessarily have to try too hard. It's not about making a huge amount of effort. You just have to, make sure that you are correctly positioned, and also it's just important to have a positive approach. Really believe that things can happen, and don't put yourself in a position where you are so isolated that you just can't take advantage of anything. Though, even if you are isolated, there are still ways in which you can maximize your good fortune. You don't have to be with people to be lucky. You don't have to be connected to be lucky, but it probably helps. Now, this moon sextile Venus does give you insights, and it allows you to look at things under the surface, and things that aren't look at things that are not immediately obvious, and have another look at them and realize that they may actually work in your favor if you give them a chance. And also, you may see things with this moon sextile Venus that other people miss, and once you see them, you're able to act on them, and act on them in a way that is impressive. And that's going to be particularly the case if you're working today. You just notice things that your colleagues, your workmates just can't see, and they realize that you've got insights, you've got a perceptiveness that they just don't have. And that is the nature of being a Cancerian. And also, moon conjunct Jupiter, that just makes you generally lucky, and your luck can come from many sources, and sometimes it's just not immediately obvious. Now, another aspect we've got is moon square sun, first quarter moon. The lunar cycle, which started on February the 28th with the new moon, has reached a decisive point. And where is it going? And it could well be a call for action. And because if you don't take the action now, then you might miss your chance. And to be more specific, the sun is in Pisces, and the moon is in Gemini, and it just could be that over the last week, as the sun has moved through Pisces, you've been thinking things through, and you've become aware of new ideas, and you're perhaps a little bit different from you were a week ago, seeing things in a new way. And it's nice to see things in a new way, and it's nice to get new information and to get new perspectives. But then there's the question, moon square sun, what do you do about it? You can't be an observer forever. And that moon square sun may be challenging you to act. And the kind of action you should be taking with this moon square sun is not anything obvious. It's not anything that people are going to necessarily notice. That you will quietly know what you need to do. And if you make the most of this moon square sun, you will start doing it. And to begin with, you probably shouldn't tell anyone about it. Just keep it to yourself. And then, over the next week, you can start developing it, and, you won't be pressured, but you'll start to realize that, those ideas that you started to get after the new moon are really starting to bear fruit. But today, with with this first quarter moon, it might be a call to act. Leo, you are in a fairly a sociable mood, like yesterday. Sociable, friendly, and you will enjoy people's company. And in many respects, today is just a continuation of yesterday. Yesterday we had the moon moving into Gemini. Today the moon is still in Gemini, and the moon in Gemini is, it's making a sextile to Venus. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter, and you will enjoy people's company. I mean, you can enjoy people's company if you give yourself the chance. So, do try to be as sociable as possible. If in doubt, meet someone, see what they've got to offer. Try to be in contact with friends. You never know what might happen. You never know where things might go, and you might be inspired by other people, and you might get a new view of the world. And so try as far as you can to be an extrovert and to give people a chance, including people you don't know, because there is a possibility today that you have encounters which are surprising. Okay, the person themselves might not be surprising, but the way they react might be surprising, and you might see a side to people's personalities that you just hadn't seen before, and I think in most cases it's going to be something fortunate. So you will see that someone is perhaps more multifaceted than you had expected, and it's also possible that you realize that you and another person have quite a lot in common, and you didn't think you'd have. You didn't think that there would be much in common, but you actually realize that this common ground does actually exist. So a lot of emphasis on other people, I hope. But when I say other people, I'm not really talking about close relationships. I'm more talking about the group, people in general. And yes, your own social skills are going to be very good, and you know what is needed to get close to other people. You know what to say, you know what not to say, and there's something about you in general, Leo, that is quite unifying. So wherever you are, you can be a unifying force, and you can do it by taking an ever so slightly dramatic approach. Leos can have a sense of drama, and if you do things if you do things dramatically, but obviously you don't have to go over the top, but just people want a bit of drama. It's that kind of day, and if you can provide that drama, then you will very much be appreciated. Virgo. Today there is a first quarter moon. So that means that the moon is square the sun, and so it's an important part of the lunar cycle. We had a new moon on February the 28th, and so this lunar cycle has started, and it's now reaching a point where something has to happen if you want to make the most of the lunar cycle. Now, in terms of you, Virgo, the sun is in Pisces and the moon is in Gemini. And what does that mean? So you could say that the sun is in Pisces, it's in your opposite sign. And so this is a time when you certainly have to accept some of the limitations on your actions. Those limitations do come very often from other people, or certainly events that you maybe don't have a great deal of control over. And in some respects it might be just easier to accept that. That's the way it is. None of us are in full control. But then the moon comes along and it makes a square to the sun, and that is the crisis. And the crisis is that you need to do something. That moon in Gemini is ambitious. Okay, it needn't be ambitious in terms of money or business success, but you've got your own ambitions, whatever they are. They do matter. And those ambitions they're yours. They don't belong to anyone else. And they're an intrinsic part of who you are and who you have become. And so you kind of have to get the balance right. Sure, you've got to accept that there are limits on what you can do, but also you have to accept that you've got a mission. You've got something you need to do now, and if you don't do it now, well, you might miss your moment. Okay, it's not a complete disaster, but what we're trying to do is make the most of the planetary energies and the lunar cycle, and now is a time when you need to break free and make it clear there are things you have to do now, and it won't necessarily wait. And you should regard this as a positive, especially as the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter and it's making a sextile to Venus. And Virgo, this really does indicate that you are someone who has a certain amount of luck on your side, and you have an idea about where you want to go. Be open about it. Don't apologize. And don't be too modest. I mean, that is very important. And don't think that your needs are less important than anyone else's. With this moon conjunct Jupiter, this gives you luck, and it gives you luck. It could be in terms of career, something to do with business, but it just could be that you're lucky in general, and if you have a vision, you have an idea about where you want to go, then you have a chance to really go for it, and that's something you very much can do. And the moon sextile Venus does indicate that there are hidden reserves you can use, maybe hidden emotional reserves, things that you're not being too open about. You kept things secret, you kept certain resources secret, but they're there. And with this moon sextile Venus, you can actually start to bring these resources out into the open, and in such a way that is useful and can get you results. Libra, we have a sextile aspect between the moon and Venus. The moon is also making a conjunction to Jupiter. So with the moon making fortunate aspects to Venus and Jupiter, this is really going to help you sort of propel yourself forward. And I don't mean this in the sense of, just ambition and sort of material things. It's about personal growth and doing things that you want to do, and also exploration. Exploration may matter. With the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, you're looking at things from a new perspective, and you can see opportunities. Opportunities are available, and you can take things to a new level with this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Also, the moon sextile Venus, it's certainly fortunate, and the fortune may actually come from other people. Other people may give you something that you don't have, and you may just have to listen to them. See what they've got to offer, and by giving other people a chance, you may be allowing something to happen which it just wouldn't be able to happen if you were just totally focused on yourself. So you don't have to always be in control. You don't always have to be the one taking the lead. You give other people a chance, and things might just happen. And at the same time, Libra, if you believe something or you think something, don't be shy about it. Right now, Librans are going to be able to communicate extremely well, and you're going to be able to communicate with power and conviction. And if you feel angry about something, then be open about it. People want to hear, and your anger won't sound fake. It will seem real, but also it won't sound. You won't sound too defensive. You'll be able to speak from the heart, and if something is important to you, Libra, then everyone is going to be very clear about this. People will understand this, and it really will help you in terms of getting your way. But it's not really about power or you getting the better of another person. That's not what the day is fundamentally about. As I said, that this moon conjunct Jupiter is a fortunate aspect. It's probably the main aspect today, and it allows you to just get in touch with things and just to be supported. The support, I think, in many cases will come from other people, but it may come from something else. It may come from yourself. It may come from just your belief in yourself, or just some guiding spirit. If you listen to the guiding spirit and you go where that guiding spirit wants, well, how can anything go wrong? Scorpio, you're quite intense at the moment, more intense than usual, and I do think that you are taking yourself fairly seriously. You realize that this is not a world in which things can be underestimated, and if you're going to bother with something, you need to give it everything you've got. And through a serious approach, you attract good luck. And that is because there is a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, and this Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini allows you to get in touch with areas which maybe other people aren't interested in or don't want to bother with, but you show a familiarity with these areas, difficult areas that most people don't want to go in, and you have this familiarity, and that familiarity kind of does bring you a certain amount of luck. And from a Scorpio perspective, this Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini is in the 8th house. So the eighth house from Scorpio is Gemini, or rather the eighth sign from Scorpio is Gemini. And this sign, Gemini, from a Scorpio perspective, you could say is associated with death. And that might sound rather grim and difficult, this sort of concept of death and decline and decay. But in natal charts, when there's a lot of stuff in the eighth house, obviously I'm not talking about a natal chart, but in natal charts, when you've got a big build-up in the eighth house, it often indicates a person who can live a long time. It's like, because a person is familiar with the concept of death, and they're not afraid of death, and they're not worried about the depths of death and moving from one world to another, because they're not worried about it. Death doesn't touch them, or death waits until the last moment and they live for a huge amount of time because of that familiarity with it. And it's maybe like when you try to avoid death and destruction, they start to chase you down. So in a very sort of short-term sense, you could say that this Moon-Jupiter conjunction is a bit like that. It's like there's something rather difficult that other people don't want to deal with, but because you are aware of it and because you're not afraid of it, it doesn't touch you. More than that, it allows you to take advantage of the situation, because you're able to go in places that other people can't, and you're motivated by several things. You're motivated by a sense that it just has to be done, maybe almost a sense of duty, personal duty to yourself, but you're also motivated by curiosity. Scorpios can be as curious as anyone, and there are certain things that you do find interesting. You know they're somewhat sort of dark, but you still want to get involved. You want to find out about them. And through that journey of discovery, you can help yourself, and you can actually, in a strange way, bring upon yourself a certain amount of good fortune. Additionally, we have the moon making a sextile to Venus, and this moon sextile Venus can be quite useful for relationships, getting on with people, getting close to people. And you can get close to people because you understand. You don't have to be told. You just have a natural feeling for certain people, and you're aware that no one is perfect, and you can almost see the darkness in people, and that's human nature. No one is entirely pleasant. We all have a darkness to us, and you can see this. And with this moon sextile Venus, you also have a certain subtlety, and that should help in terms of relationships. So it is a time when you can get close to people, when you know what to say, when you know when you know what not to say, and also, other people can bring you luck, and it may be because you understand the darkness of other people that you can also create a situation where other people can work in your favor. So it's a complicated day, Scorpio, but it's a complicated day in a way that is useful, and maybe even in a strange way rather pleasant. Sagittarius, moon continues moving through your sign, and in this sign it makes a conjunction to Jupiter. And this moon Jupiter conjunction, I would have said, is fortunate. It allows you to make the most of other people. So don't hesitate in your social life. See who is around. See what other people can do for you. Also see what you can do for them. I mean, it's it's not just about you benefiting or anyone else benefiting. You and other people can help each other, and so the more cooperation we have today, the better for everyone. And the moon in Gemini does make a square to the sun, and so that means we've got first quarter moon, and that takes us back to the new moon on February the 28th. So February the 28th, we see the beginning of the lunar cycle. There was a new moon. I think it was it around in the 10th degree of Pisces, and that new moon, Sagittarius, if you think back to it, might have reminded you of your priorities and the fact that you wanted to anchor yourself and give yourself a certain sense of security, and you might have wanted to link with the past with this new moon. I mean, I don't want to read too much into this new moon. I mean, these new moons, there's always a new moon in Pisces every year, but this is how it might have occurred to you. But it might also have been fairly introspective. It might have encouraged you to look down rather than up, not to be totally obsessed with what's going on in the outside world. There are more important things to worry about, like yourself and your home and your family. So that was how the new moon might have occurred to you. But now the moon is making a square to the sun, and I've used this word several times when I've gone through the 12 signs, and that is the word crisis. And so moon square sun can be a crisis. But when I say this word crisis, I don't mean the word crisis in a bad sense. I mean it in terms of a decision, moon square sun. And there's only so far you can go in terms of exploring yourself and your past and what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel secure. At a certain stage, you need to consider other things. And those other things might be other people. You have to maybe consider other people's role in your life. And I'm not just talking about your family. I'm talking about, all the people you meet in your everyday life, perhaps your friends, perhaps new people, and also just outside events which you don't have necessarily much control over. And that might be the crisis, to look at things in terms of the other, to look at things in terms of things that you're not fully recognizing. And that is where the opportunity lies, because there is this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. The moon-Jupiter conjunction is in your opposite sign. It's, in a way, moon-Jupiter and Gemini, you could say that is everything that you are not. And so this first quarter moon, for many Sagittarians, could be challenging, but I do think that it's challenging in a fortunate way. It's also a time, when you can be lucky through other people, and it's not necessarily your luck, and certain relationships are luckier than others. That's always the case, often the case, isn't it? Two people can have a connection with each other, they can be with each other, and one person benefits from a relationship, the other person, well, they may not benefit from it, or it may be neutral. But certain people, I do think, Sagittarius, can really help you out, and there's just some danger that you miss on this because you're looking the other way, or rather you're looking down. You're looking at your own issues, your own problems, your own past. And it's nice to look at the past. It's nice to be aware of what's happened years ago, decades ago. But that's not the whole story. And you do need to be future orientated, and with this first quarter moon, that's what you need to think about. It is fortunate, though. We shouldn't forget this. This first quarter moon is conjunct Jupiter. The moon is conjunct Jupiter, and the sun is square Jupiter. Moon is square sun, of course, and so it is this crisis, but a crisis that I feel confident that you can benefit from. Capricorn. Capricorn, as far as you're concerned, there are things that have to be done, and you want to get them out of the way, and you don't want any delay. And as a result, you're going to give the impression of being someone who is fairly organized. You'll have ideas about the way things should be done. You're not going to want to be contradicted, and your approach is probably the right approach. And you may also think that you have to be consistent. You may be thinking, for example, about what you've been saying to other people, what kind of advice you've been giving to other people, and can you actually follow that advice yourself? And that can be difficult, but maybe you should be thinking about what you've been saying recently, the kind of practices you've been advocating, and ask yourself, well, have you actually been doing it for yourself? Have you been also looking after yourself in the same way you've been looking after other people? So a bit of consistency in that direction might be a good idea. But also you do come over still as someone who is very moral, also very real, and people are going to appreciate you at the moment. And they have been appreciating you for quite a long time, even if you haven't recognized this. And just by being yourself at the moment, you can attract the right class of people. So you can really sort of benefit from the various contacts you make. And it is actually quite a good time for making new contacts. You can do it in a way that is very systematic. I'm not quite sure how you do that, because I'm not a particularly sociable person, but there are ways of making contact, apparently. And if you do make the effort, I really do think that you will be rewarded. And going back to this concept of organization, I think that today you really can benefit from being well organized, and being well organized in your own way, in the kind of way that you've been aspiring to for some time, maybe ever since Jupiter went into Gemini in last May. And so with Jupiter in Gemini in the Capricorn chart, that is a time when you can take organization to a new level. And with the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini, then this is a chance to really make things happen and create the kind of environment that is right for you. And also this sense of organization can become a sense of responsibility as well. And if you're working, then your actions can really help, because the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and the moon with the sextile to Venus allows you to be sensible and mature and sort of grounded, and this is just something that people are going to appreciate. People who are working with you, for you, you're working for them, they're just going to appreciate your approach. It's just very down to earth, but also not boring. There's a certain vibrancy and excitement to it, and you remind people that if they just do it properly, then things can really work out. And in a quiet way, that might mean that you can actually have quite an inspiring presence on other people. As far as relationships are concerned, well, the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and the moon is also making a conjunction to Jupiter. And the moon in a Capricorn chart does have a link with relationships because it rules Cancer, your opposite sign. So with moon making these aspects to Venus and Jupiter, I would have said that the important people in your life are on good form, and they can make your life more interesting, and they can be useful as well. Don't think that you're on your own. People might have been a bit lazy in the past. They might have been irresponsible, but today I think people do understand what you need, and they are going to be there for you. And this is just going to create a general spirit of harmony and togetherness, and even a feeling that you and other people are involved in a joint enterprise, and you're all ready to make a success of it. Aquarius. Today we have a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Arguably, this moon-Jupiter conjunction is the main aspect of the day. This conjunction is a powerful conjunction. Okay, it's slightly stronger in Australia and New Zealand than in the Americas, but still, the moon and Jupiter are both in Gemini, and so we definitely have this conjunction. All of us can feel this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter, and it does make you feel quite happy and in control of your own abilities. You've got a certain amount of talent that you've been given, and you always need an opportunity to actually use this talent and find ways of using it. And today you can bring it to bear in a way that is just easygoing. Everyone understands it. People appreciate it. There's not really much of an effort. Though one thing we've got today is a first quarter moon, Aquarius. So we've got the moon in Gemini square the sun in Pisces. And this takes you back to the beginning of the current lunar cycle, which was on February the 28th. And so that new moon on February the 28th in Pisces could have been about your resources, what you had and what you didn't have. I mean, that might have been some of the feelings that were going on at the end of February. And it could have been quite a financially orientated new moon. So I don't know how has it worked. Have a look at what was going on February the 28th. Indeed, over the last week, as the new lunar cycle has developed, and now we have a little bit of a clash here because the moon is square the sun, and the question is, what happens now? So the new moon, the first quarter moon, represents a key point in the lunar cycle where you should be looking at manifestation, and it may be about just considering all your resources. So you have all these resources, financial resources in terms of your abilities, could be resources in terms of your qualifications, and you have to just look at it all. And that was perhaps what you were aware of at the time of a new moon. But now the challenge is moon in Gemini square the sun in Pisces is, how do you actually use these resources? How do you actually take what you got and turn them into something that you are completely happy with? Yes, it is a creative day. And I think today's going to be good because the moon is conjunct Jupiter. But I'm not saying there's no challenge there. And I think if you really think about it, Aquarius, you do maybe realize that you could be going further, and that some of your resources, some of your reserves, you're holding it back because you're maybe not quite sure how to use these reserves, or maybe you don't want to use them for one reason or another. And so that is the question. That is a challenge. How do you bring it all together? How do you take what you have, take what you've earned? Because I'm not, by the way, advocating that you spend a load of money on making yourself feel happy. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. It's about managing your resources, and resources, I must make this clear, it's not just about money, it's about everything. It's everything that you are, everything that you built up over the years. How do you take all of that and turn it into something that is a real expression of who you are? And that is something that you can work out, and you can work it out in your own way, perhaps on your own. But don't underestimate other people. The moon is making a sextile to Venus, and that moon sextile Venus can be about relationships, especially as Venus is in mutual reception with the sun by exaltation. And so with moon sextile Venus, it's a good idea to get some feedback. So if there's something you want to go further with, you feel that you've got to really make the most of something, get some support from other people, because you might get some good advice. Pisces, the moon continues to move through Gemini, where it makes a conjunction to Jupiter, and moon conjunct Jupiter is a great aspect, especially if you're a Pisces. Jupiter is your ruler, and it's also the planet of good fortune. And so moon conjunct Jupiter does make you, in general, more fortunate than usual, especially as the moon is also making a sextile to Venus. Now that moon conjunct Jupiter, moon sextile Venus, it might be about financial good fortune. That is possible. So if you feel that something is owed to you, or you feel that money might be available, then today, with those two aspects, moon conjunct Jupiter, moon sextile Venus, it seems that there is it's something you can do, and it shouldn't be too much effort. Moon conjunct Jupiter requires a little bit of effort, but not a huge amount of effort. It's not moon conjunct Saturn, after all. And there is, additionally, the moon is making a square to the sun. In other words, it's a first quarter moon. And you had the Pisces new moon on February the 28th. I think that was in the 10th degree of Pisces. And now things have moved on. It's been a week since the new moon. The lunar cycle is underway. And what is the challenge? There is always a little bit of a challenge with that first quarter moon. And that first quarter moon might be, to take what you started with, how you went into the Pisces season is still very much with us, but that new moon really ushered in the lunar cycle, the Pisces lunar cycle, and with this first quarter moon, you do have to make certain things real. You've got ideas, you've got feelings, you're very sensitive to what's happening around you, because after all, you're a Pisces, typical Pisces. And the first quarter moon it's a challenge is to take everything you're seeing, everything you're feeling, everything you're hoping for as well, and just making it real and grounding it. And this grounding process is on and off has been an important theme ever since Jupiter went into Gemini in last May. But now with this first quarter moon, you have another chance. You have a chance to really look at your roots and to feel secure and make yourself feel secure. And this might have something to do with your relationship to your home and your family, but it's not 100% easy, because it is a square. And as I've been saying quite a lot over the course of this video, that first quarter moon is about a sense of crisis. Something has to be realized, and now is a time, Pisces, when you can do it. And so, if you handle this first quarter moon correctly, then I think that you're really putting yourself in a good position. Once you've got the basics sorted out, everything else will just flow naturally from it. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it's time to look at today, Thursday, March 6th, from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 21. This is a hexagram that does crop up every now and then, biting through. And this hexagram is about punishment. It's about reform. It's not punishment as in revenge. It's about taking something or someone that is not perfect and has perhaps been misbehaving, and it may be us misbehaving. It may not be punishment of another person. It might be how we view our own behavior. And it's so easy to learn about ourselves and to understand what happened in the past, and to understand also how things from the past have influenced our current behavior and have encouraged us to make mistakes. It's so easy to do that, or at least relatively easy, but it's difficult to actually change the pattern. We can know why it's happening, but we can still just keep going with it. And so it's difficult to know who is being punished here. And this hexagram has a symbol. The reason it's biting through is because at the heart of things is something that is pure, something that is fundamentally good, but it's being hidden. It's being hidden by this hard material. It's this build up from the past. The symbolism in the I Ching is of leather and of gold, a piece of gold surrounded by thick leather, and we have to get through it. Hence the idea of biting through. And it could be biting through until we can find the goodness in ourselves, or perhaps the goodness in other people. The concept of the heart of gold, in spite of their external behavior. He's very nice actually, but good as gold, but actually surface he's a monster, but don't worry about that. He's as good as gold, really. And so this hexagram has two moving lines, and the third line moves and the sixth line moves, and both lines are about punishment. And with the third line moving, it's about how do we deal with someone, maybe ourselves, maybe another person, who is not doing what we want, and we think they're doing something wrong. And there is a danger here that we apply the wrong punishment. We think this is the right way to go about it, but in fact, it's not. It isn't. And one symbol here is of poison. There is a sense of poison. Talk about a poison arrow. Something has been poisoned with this poison arrow. You take the arrow out, but there's still a bit of poison left. Though that moving line, the third moving line, is not especially unfortunate. It's not a major disaster if we haven't got all the poison out, but we just need to think about how we're going to reform something. And just because we think we've got a good idea about changing something, maybe whether it's disciplining ourselves or disciplining another person, there's still something left. And so that it has been incomplete. Now, although the third hexagram, the third line says it's not a problem, there is still something left. I remember long ago in the 80s when I went to India, I got an infection in my foot, and this infection was really bad, and my foot was really getting infected, and I went to this I went to this hotel, and I poured boiling water on this burn, and it really hurt, and but still I got rid of it, and I bandaged it up, and I was really careful. I was going through India and Delhi and all the dirt on the streets, but and I got home, I got back to England, and I had this perfect foot. My foot was brilliant. I'd completely cured the problem. And of course, the moment I got back to England, I was just relaxed. I took off the bandages, and straight away it just was as bad as ever. It immediately got reinfected, and so that's when I started to relax, because I thought I'd got rid of the poison, but actually I hadn't, and so this might be it. Don't think that you've got rid of the poison. You might think you've got rid of the poison, but you haven't necessarily. And this might actually be taking us to the top line, because the top line moves. And so with the top line moving, with the top line moving, it's got a bit serious. It's got a bit more serious, because the top line is talking about someone who will not listen to reason. It talks about this thing called a Kang. I have no idea what a Kang is, but that's what the I Ching talks about. Now, Kang, I think you spell it Cangue. A Kang is a form of punishment where you put this helmet over someone's head, not helmet, maybe a cage over someone's head, and it hides someone's ears. And apparently it's some traditional Chinese punishment, rather like the stocks. And this traditional Chinese punishment it shows someone who is really beyond the pale, incorrigible, and we're dealing with someone who will not listen to reason, absolutely will not listen to reason, and maybe that's us. We might be really set in our ways, and we thought we'd got out the poison, whatever. Maybe we've gone through psychotherapy. We know why something happened. We got rid of the poison, but it's still there. Something is still festering, and it could get worse. Again, who is it? Is it us? Is it someone else? And that may be a warning also about other people. So if you're dealing with people who are up to no good, or you think you think that they need to be disciplined, or you need to read the Rat Act to them, you do it. But do you get a response? You might think you've got a response, but don't be too forgiving. Someone might give the impression that they have understood, that they're going to reform their ways, but then you hit the sixth line, and you are dealing with someone who is incorrigible. And one thing about this cage, it's over someone's ears. They can't listen. They can't hear you anyway. So you maybe have to accept that some people cannot be reformed. In terms of yourself, well, you can be reformed if that is a problem, but it's not going to be easy. Anyway, we've got two moving lines, and so that means that this hexagram it moves to a second hexagram, and so the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 55, which is abundance. And this is a pretty good hexagram, which marks a real difference when you compare this with the previous hexagram of biting through. Abundance is a time where things are coming together, where in a way things have reached their peak, and it seems that everything is working. And so this is a very sudden change, and it may be that there's a time when we feel stuck, when we can't get through to everyone, but no one is listening, and then suddenly it's all okay. It's as if nothing had happened. And maybe then we should be looking at abundance in a different way. So if suddenly something comes together after a prolonged period of difficulty where people really were being problematic, we couldn't reform them, they wouldn't listen, maybe we wouldn't listen, and then suddenly everything's okay. So what might that mean? Well, the I Ching does tell us with abundance that nothing lasts forever, and that everything inevitably must go into decline. And so we might then be asking, why might something go into decline? Well, decline is inevitable. I mean, that's just the way of nature. Things grow, and then at a certain stage they go into a state of decay. I mean, that's just life. But in terms of the previous hexagram, given biting through, the concept of someone needing to be reformed and not being reformed, certainly in this case, not being reformed, refusing to listen, it may be that we just brush over it all, we sweep it all under the carpet, and things just seem to be going okay because we're just not looking. We don't want to know about the problems. And for a period of time, things are great. Things really are moving, and we feel that we've arrived. But because we have not addressed the fundamental problem, because people are still their same old selves, because we are our same old selves, because of all of that, decline might be inevitable. Those character faults which have been messing things up, which we now pretend don't exist, are going to manifest again. And, people don't change. We don't change. And so abundance may actually contain a warning. And so going back to the previous hexagram, biting through in terms of reforming ourselves, reforming other people, maybe we actually need to try a little bit harder, because if we don't make a breakthrough, if we don't get through to ourselves, don't get through to other people, if we continue in a situation where us and other people have a character flaw or are unreformed, then in the end, however good things might seem, there'll be a problem and things will go into inevitable decline. And it's now time to go back to the astrology and the fact that we have a first quarter moon. And the picture on the thumbnail is of a first quarter moon. And this first quarter moon happens at a particular time. So here it is. That's the exact moment of that first quarter when the sun is at 1621 Pisces and the moon is at 1621 Gemini. So sun and moon are in exactly 90 degrees apart. This is not as important as a new moon or a full moon, but we might be able to relocate this chart and get some ideas about what parts of the world might be most influenced by this first quarter moon. Can't help but notice this chart is set for London, that Uranus is on the midheaven at the time of when that first quarter moon is exact. But I've said enough about the UK and how difficult things are for the UK. Uranus on the midheaven, it just goes on, doesn't it? But so I don't really want to look at this from a really geographical perspective. Just want to consider this first quarter moon and its general features. This first quarter moon is conjunct Jupiter. So the moon is not exactly conjunct Jupiter, but it's 4 degrees apart. And I think for many of us, this first quarter moon might actually be quite fortunate. It allows us to recognize what needs to be done, and we can see this in terms of fortunate action. And so if we think back to that new moon on February the 28th, and we now start to understand what this lunar cycle is about. At this stage, we know what it's about. We know what it's about for us. So, think back to February the 28th. Think about how things have been developing since February the 28th. And now, with the moon conjunct Jupiter, and indeed with the moon sextile Venus, that might be a time for, fortunate action. And in terms of relationships, I think that this looks okay. And so it's a lunation that for us, for ordinary people, should be fine. And in general, we need to take action now if we want to make the most of this lunation cycle. Now, when we talk about lunation cycles, there was a book by Dane Raja, who he wrote a lot of books. He was really a renowned astrologer. Everyone talked about him in the 1980s when I was learning astrology. And so he wrote this book called The Lunation Cycle, where he went through the phases of the moon, and he was talking about how people differ depending on what phase of the moon they're in. So you could see this almost in quite a karmic way. So if you're a new moon person, if you're born shortly after the new moon, you are at the beginning of something. You might say you're a new soul. No one says they're a new soul. They all say, I'm an old soul. They don't say, I'm a new soul. But you can be a new soul as well as an old soul. What does it mean to be a new soul, by the way? Does that mean you've just started? You've just, in terms of reincarnation, that you have just begun your journey, that you've come from nothing? I'm not convinced about that. It might just be about spirals, that we go through phases of incarnation where we have certain themes. We have certain themed incarnations. And when we've reached a theme, maybe we've gone through 20 or 30 incarnations. I don't know how many. Maybe we can do it quicker if we're really, if our higher self really gets it together. And when we get through one spiral, we can move to the next spiral. And then we have a sort of new moon way of looking at things. This is all brand new. I haven't seen this before. This is exciting. Then you have the first quarter moon. It's not right at the beginning, but it's close to the beginning. But now is the time to actually make it happen. And you could say that the first quarter moon is pretty fortunate in that sense. It's not stale. It's not jaded. It's about taking the new and actually turning it into something and really taking advantage of it all. Then, of course, you go through the other cycles, full moon. You get the full picture. You're a full moon kind of person. You're at a point of actual manifestation where you see the consequences of everything, and you're now having to deal with these consequences. And then you could have moved towards someone who was born just before the new moon. Like me, my sun and the moon are 45 degrees apart. So, my sun in Gemini, moon in Aries. So my moon we're approaching the next new moon. So I'm towards the end of the spiral. It maybe is getting a bit tired, and I've seen it all before, maybe, and I've lost that sense of excitement at a sort of karmic level. I mean, that's just one possibility. So we're talking about the first quarter moon, and so it might be a good idea, just to look at a few people who were born at the first quarter, and so we'd expect first quarter moon people to be experimental. This is something new for them. And it's not just people, maybe animals. If you've been listening to this video, you'll have seen that the dog has been barking. The dog has been doing all sorts of things. Actually, the dog threw up about an hour ago in the middle of this video. I mean, that's why there was a pause. So I had to deal with, had to attend. I had to stop what I was doing because the dog had thrown up. And so, here's the dog's chart, and so the dog has. I don't know what time the dog was born. So the dog was has got Chari. It's Slovak for a charm, apparently. And so the dog is a Leo and just got the moon in Scorpio. So if you've been listening to it barking over the course of this video, that's you're dealing with a first quarter dog. This dog, if people have incarnations, dogs can have incarnations as well. So in the evolution of a dog's soul, it is a moment of crisis. This is a new beginning for the dog, but it's developed a little, and so the dog is just trying to, with the moon in Scorpio square her sun, is trying to find her real purpose as a dog. Maybe I'm trivializing this, but that's the crisis, and that's a challenge in her incarnation, perhaps. Looking at humans, I mean, it might be about responsibility and having to deal with responsibility. Because at the new moon, if you're a new moon kind of person, maybe you don't have to deal with responsibility. You can just you start things, but you don't necessarily have to finish them. You don't actually have to see the consequences through. And a chart that I've looked at quite a lot is of the sort of the Russian submariner Alexander Marinesko, who killed 10,000 people when he sunk the Wilhelm Gustloff in 1945. So he is someone who was a first quarter moon, and so I'm not going to spend long on his chart, but just he has a sun in Capricorn, moon in Aries, so he has this responsibility of being commander of a submarine. He has a drink problem. He's at the beginning, and he doesn't really know how to handle this responsibility, the challenge of responsibility. And he did what he had to do. He sunk this German boat and killed 10,000 people, and wasn't his fault. He was doing his duty. No one's blaming him for it, but that is his responsibility. And so he has an alcohol problem, and that may be linked with it, and having to deal with it. And so if we've got a first quarter moon, there may be that feeling of what do we do? How do we handle what we've been given? And another person who has a first quarter moon, you might not have heard of this person, but you might have heard of him if you're in the UK, and he is Dominic Cummings. So Dominic Cummings is a political genius. I mean, he's not in politics, but he organizes things, and he was largely responsible for Brexit. He was a mastermind behind Brexit. He helped with Boris Johnson's campaign for the premiership and his 2019 election, and for a time he was Boris Johnson's special advisor. Then he fell out with Boris Johnson, but he has all these ideas about British politics. I mean, he's generally of the right. He doesn't have a particularly good impression of Nigel Farage, but he's now come out and said he would support reform. We don't know to what extent, whether he's going to be actively involved with reform. But how this new moon is manifests. So you can see he's got the sun in Sagittarius and the moon in Pisces. Well, he might have the moon in Pisces. We don't actually know what time he's born, but still there is a square relationship between his sun and the moon. His moon may be in late Aquarius, maybe in early Pisces. So he has started something. He started something with maybe with Brexit. I mean, he has had a big impact on British politics under the surface. But he now maybe has to take responsibility for what he's created. And the question is he going to start to take a central role in British politics? I mean, he's arguably helped create a lot of chaos in Britain. And he has a blog, he has all sorts of ideas, he's concerned about big government and the blob. So there are sort of echoes of Elon Musk there, but he's much more of an intellectual. And so here you have the challenge. You've got the sun in the sun in Sagittarius, all these big ideas, but then you have the square to the moon. This is the crisis. That's what his life is about. He's very good at starting things, but now he's got to actually address the issue and deal with it. And maybe that's something he's going to have to deal with over the next couple of years as Britain's political situation spirals out of control. As far as the United States is concerned, Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom, governor of California, is born with a first quarter moon. So he has his sun in Libra and his moon in Capricorn. And in fact, his sun and the moon are exactly square each other. And so I would have said that sun square moon is probably quite fortunate. I mean, he is someone who has ideas. I mean, you might not like his ideas. He does have ideas, but this is this brand new world. He's developed it a little bit, and now with this first quarter moon, it's time for action. It's time to see what can he actually do. And you could say, well, he's governor of California. That's how he's responding to his first quarter moon. I don't think he'll get much further. I somehow don't think he's ever going to be American president. I think he's probably damaged his reputation too much with the fires, and California is not at the moment seen as being sort of a great sort of role model about how you should run a state. But maybe already being governor of California, that's how he's responded to that first quarter moon. It's kind of easy for him, because the first quarter moon is in some respects, the best phase of the lunation cycle. It's at the beginning, but not right at the beginning. We've got something to work on, but it's not at the full moon. It's not in a waning moon. We're not in decline yet. And someone who made it all the way to the White House was George Bush Jr. So George Bush Jr. was born with the sun in Cancer, 13 Cancer, conjunct United States' sun, and the moon at 16 Libra. So with George Bush Jr., if you actually think about George Bush Jr., you don't get the idea with George Bush Jr. that you're dealing with an old soul, do you? You get the impression of someone who's quite new on the scene from a karmic point of view. And at the same time, he has a little bit of experience. He's not a new moon person. He's a first quarter person. And he says, well, it's time for action, time to get himself together. And, like Gavin Newsom, he became a state governor, became governor of Texas, and then very quickly became president soon after that. So I think if you think about George Bush Jr., and he always gave the impression of being, to me, slightly politically immature and naive. And I was, when he first announced his candidature, I was, God, how can this man possibly be president? But he had that sort of spontaneous new moon feel to it. Sorry, not new moon feel. That first quarter thing. It's time for him to get himself together. It may be like, if you're a first quarter moon kind of person, it may be like, in terms of a stage of life, it may be like you're 21 or you're in your early 20s. You've just left childhood, maybe you've just left university. It's time for action, and what are you going to do with your life? That might be how first quarter moons, how first quarter moon people feel about things, or how they might feel. And with first quarter moons, it is action. What action am I going to take? And sometimes that action can be quite destructive or self-destructive. Here's Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Houses of Parliament in 1605, and hanged to having been tortured, but he felt there was a need for action, and so he had the moon in Leo. He could have had the moon in Cancer, moon in Leo, and he had the sun in Taurus. Taurus is a standard signature of a terrorist, sun in Taurus. A lot of terrorists have their sun in Taurus, and the moon is square the sun. So this is his moment of action. That's what the first quarter moon is about. One might not disagree with his moment of action, but that's how it feels as far as he is concerned. And so those are a few examples. One more example. You may know more about him than me. I don't know. The Marquis de Sade. The Marquis de Sade, who the word sadist comes from Marquis de Sade, and he wrote erotic novels at the end of the 18th century, and spent some time in the Bastille. He wasn't actually in the Bastille when the Bastille was besieged. He'd already been moved somewhere else. But the Marquis de Sade had the sun at 12 degrees Gemini and the moon at 13 degrees Virgo. So again, what does he do? Maybe this is someone, he has his fantasies. I mean, that's what his books are about. I mean, although he's associated with sadism, I don't think he was much of a sadist actually in his real life. It was more about what he wrote about and the fantasies he had that he wrote about in his books that made him notorious. And so, sun in Gemini, moon in Virgo. You could say sun and moon, both ruled by Mercury. So a mercurial first quarter moon, and so he puts that energy into writing. Though you can see that it's the clash there is between the sun in the 8th house. So the sun in the 8th house, you can see that with in terms of sexuality and his ideas about sexuality and his deep feelings and fantasies. What does he do with it all? And the answer is moon in Virgo. Moon in Virgo in the 10th house. He writes and he gets noticed. And several centuries after his death, he's still very much someone who people have heard of. And even if we haven't heard of him, we've certainly heard of that word that comes from his name, which is sadism. And those are a few thoughts on the first quarter moon. I should have perhaps gone into it in a little bit more detail, but I hope you found that of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you would have liked it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.